Hi friends, hello, happy Thursday. Welcome to Craft Your Joy Live. I'm super excited to be here with you today. I have a really fun tutorial that I'm going to be sharing today. And we're not going to make a card, but we're going to make elements for the card. And if we have time to make the card, we'll make the card, but we'll see. So, hello everyone. I see people popping in. Yeah, Sue just said happy rainy morning. Yes, here in Maryland, it's getting ready to rain, or it looks like it's getting ready to rain. But anyway, hello friends. I see everybody popping in. It's so excited to see everyone. Okay, we're going to get to it. We're going to dive right in. So today's tutorial is going to be, I'm bringing out one of my stamp sets from my Gina K line that came out around, I think, this time last year, and it has a big honkin' floral in it. And I wanted to share some watercolor techniques today, or some watercolor tips, in keeping with what we've been sharing all year long so far. And I'm going to talk about pastel watercolors and colored pencils and how to use them to color your big honkin' floral stamps or anything else that's big and honkin' that you want to color. And I wanted to talk about pastel watercolors today and tell you a little bit about the differences between them, pastel watercolors, and gouache, which we've talked about on this channel. And I've got a couple tips and tricks along the way. So there's quite a bit of a lesson that's going to happen today before we start working on the coloring of our stamp. So, hello, Michelle said, thank you, love your earrings. Oh, thank you. Andrea, she usually pops in here, but Andrea Shear Art, she created these. They're amazing. I'll pop her information in. Okay, all of the supplies that I'm using are linked down below here in YouTube and on Facebook, so that I'll be talking about them along the way, but I've put them all down below in the description. Yes, there is pastel watercolor, and it's weird and odd and kind of neat. So we're going to totally dive into it today. So let's go ahead down to our overhead camera. Take off my glasses so I can see. I'm going to talk about a lot of different things today. Pastel watercolor, coloring our big honkin' stamp. So let's talk about the stamp first. So I pulled this out. This is beautiful. Speak Beautiful Things from my Gina K line. Love this stamp. I have a lot of tutorials on the channel with this stamp, but I really love this big honkin' flower. And I love it so much because it is a big honkin' flower, and it gives us a lot of room to paint, to color, to do all kinds of different kinds of techniques within the flower. And today I'm using it for pastel watercolor. So that's the stamp that we're using. And I've got my big honkin' stamp here. But first, we're going to talk about pastel watercolor. So let's just dive in. Take my face out for a bit. I've got two brands here. Now, down below in the description, I put in a few different examples of pastel watercolor. And what I wanted to talk about is pastel watercolor. Here is some pastel watercolor from Holbein. These are, I was really curious about this set, and this set, but I've had this one for a while. So you can find pastel watercolors in a couple different brands. These are two brands that I have. There's also a brand from Prima. There's also pastel watercolors from Prima that are super versatile as well. So the reason why I'm sharing these today is because they're a little bit different than gouache. So pastel watercolor has beautiful colors. There's beautiful colors, and they're pastel-y. So here's White Nights, and here's Holbein. Let me open up Holbein. So Holbein, I took the paints and just squeeze them out. This shell pink is probably one of my favorite colors. It's actually on several of my palettes. It's on my floral palette that I absolutely love. I've talked about this on the channel, but it's been a while since I've talked about it. So these are some examples of pastel watercolors. We're going to swatch some out so that you can kind of get a good feel for them. Now, pastel watercolors are watercolors that have more white in them. And in the example, White Nights, this brand, and I believe in Holbein, they use titanium dioxide white. So, no, not titanium dioxide. Boy, words are hard today. Titanium white is used. And titanium white is that exactly what it is. It's a white. So you can see this is a Chinese white in this palette. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can mix up your own pastels using the white that may or may not be in the palette you already have. So, but these are convenience colors. These are fun colors. These are fun paints to create with. So some of them are a little more expensive than others, but I really dig them and I wanted to share them with you today. And I wanted to share a little bit of the differences between these and gouache. And so let's just dive in. Let's go ahead and paint some out so I can talk about them. Now, I've got some water here. I also have some colored pencils because we're going to be doing some colored pencil work over top of the watercolor work that we're going to do. So let's go ahead and just swatch a few of these out so I can kind of show you. I've got a couple here. This is some lilac and some blue from this set. And you can see my swatches here. This color right here is called Coral. Now, you can see that they activate really, really quickly with water, and they're very milky, okay? Because they have, let's just go ahead and show you, there's opacity here. I'm going to keep painting all the way down. This brush holds a lot of water. I'm going to just keep on painting. Look at that. That's a lot of pigment. Let me clean off my brush a little bit here and just kind of water this down. So that coral color is very, very opaque, but you can get some really nice, it's still a watercolor, so see how I can change the value of that color, even though it's a pastel. I can change the value of it simply by adding water to it. But we've got a really nice opacity here. Now, what makes this different? What makes the pastel watercolors a bit different than gouache? Gouache is a thicker consistency. So, and I've shared it on the channel. I did want to bring it in today to create a lot of confusion because I wanted to have some fun with this paint. So gouache is a little bit of a thicker consistency, and gouache tends to be a matte finish, but a thick matte finish, where these pastel watercolors are opaque. They're very opaque. You can see that opacity here, and then you can see how I've watered that down and changed that value. But see, I can just reconstitute that color and get it moving. So it's opaque and it's got a nice flat look to it, but it's not as intense as a gouache. So now you may have a watercolor set that has some pastels in it. Like some of the White Night sets have pastels. 2 or 3 weeks ago when we were working with the Rosa Gallery, there are many of you I know that use the Rosa Gallery set. A couple of their sets have some pastel watercolors in them. I'm thinking specifically of the color Coral, which is very similar to this one. So you might have a few of those in your stash already. So, Michelle just mentioned the Art Nouveau Kuretake set, and I'm going to grab that set real quick because I have that set. This is the Art Nouveau Kuretake set. And you can see it's kind of got that milky look to it. I was saving this set. I was saving this for another tutorial that I probably was going to do next week. But you know what? I've got it. And Michelle mentioned it, so let's get it out. So yes, they're very, very similar to the sets that I'm using today. I'll add this Art Nouveau set to the list. So see how milky, I'm just picking a color that's very similar to this one. See how milky this is? So this can be used like a gouache. You can see how milky that is. It's so pretty. Can be used like a gouache, but there's a little bit of a difference. You can see that there's opacity here, but when it dries, you can tell that it's a watercolor. But these Art Nouveau colors are gorgeous. So yes, Michelle, very, very similar to the pastel colors that I'm talking about here. And here's the packaging for for these colors and the names for these colors. And I was saving these to kind of share these in another tutorial. But you know what? I kind of whipped them out and used them today. But so you can see how very, very similar. Now let me show you. Let me grab another piece of paper. And let me show you. These are the Holbein ones. You can see, like, from the things I've already swatched, like how similar they are in colors. And I just really like them. They're like Easter egg colors, right? So here's Shell Pink. You can see how milky that is. It's got there's a lot of pigment in here, but there's also a lot of white. So that's what makes it so, this Shell Pink is so pretty. So pretty. I just love it. I absolutely love it. Do you need the pastel colors? No, but you might already have some in some sets that you have. And if you're thinking like how fun it might be to, if you've been thinking about gouache, but you don't want to invest in gouache, which I get. If you're thinking about trying to add a little bit more of a milky consistency to your watercolors, most of the watercolor work I do is like super vibrant, super transparent, but I'm really, really dig using these pastel watercolors for my paper crafting projects, also to get a variety between opacity and transparency. So the beautiful things about these watercolors is that opacity that you're getting. You can see how opaque that color is, but look at how beautifully you can change the value of these colors by adding water. Okay, I feel myself nerding out a little bit. Now, if you have, we're going to have another little nerd out here. If you have just a regular watercolor set, any watercolor set in your stash, I just grabbed this real quick before I went live. This is a Winsor Newton Cotman set. You can see I love it. It's a well-loved set. It's very nice. I've got all of these colors in here, and I also have 3 rows of gallery colors in here, a CMYK. But right over here is a Chinese white. So I wanted to show you how you could mix up, let's do an experiment here, how you can mix up your own pastels with white. So let's give this a little bit, of a wet wash there. So I'm going to take my permanent rose here. Is this my permanent rose? This is Opera. This is like an opera pink. Love this color though. I'm going to take it and put it down here. Oh boy, I don't know if you can hear. I don't know if they're coming through. I did close the window right before we went live, but the birdies are just out in full force right now. Just love it. Okay. Love the spring birds. All right, I've got a little bit of this color. This is actually Permanent Rose, which is one of my favorites. I don't feel like that's Permanent Rose. It is. It is Permanent Rose. Okay, so we got Permanent Rose. And then I'm going to take some of this white And you can see that that white has got a milky consistency to it, but it is, oh, I got the black in there. It is a white watercolor, so you can use it to make your own pastels. So let's get a big amount of it here, big honkin' amount, so that I can whip up this pastel. Oh my goodness. Look at that. And let's just show you. We can make that pastel color. But here's what we're not getting. We're not getting that intense opacity because I need more white in order to make that happen. So let's just add a little more white. And my consistency is off. So that's one of the differences. If you want pastels that you're going to go straight up and have that pastel effect, you know, you may want to consider getting a couple pastel colors in your favorite colors. But if you're interested in using what you have, which I highly suggest, I always suggest using what you have, then you have to work with your consistency here. So I've got a consistency of about 2% milk. And I really want this to be a little bit thicker if I want to get that opacity. So I need my brush to not have as much water. And I need to be able to get more of that pigment, more of that white in order to get that consistency. I definitely got that pastel effect. But in order to get that opacity, I'm really going to have to noodle with it. So that's why when you're working with your watercolor set, and if you have a white, you can immediately get a pastel, but it's going to be a little bit more transparent. So let me show you what that permanent rose looks like at 100% strength here. So see, there's permanent rose with a little bit of green in it. There's permanent rose right there. So adding that white gave me the pastel, but it's more of a transparent pastel. Now, working with these kind of pastels, these pastel watercolors, they've got a more white pigment added to the watercolor, so we're getting that opacity. So it can be used as, you can make it your own if you already have your own white, or and get that transparent look, or you can consider using like a pastel version. Now, you can also, and I've shared this many, many, many times on the channel, you can also grab a tube of white gouache, or my friend, Dr. P.H. Martin's The Bleed Proof White. And I've shared this before. I've had this forever. So let's do an experiment, right? Because we're here. Let's do an experiment. I'm going to clean this off. Thank you, Gloria. Gloria said you explained this so well. This is the nerdy part. We're having a total nerd out tutorial today. But hey, at least you know what to expect from me, right? We're going to nerd out. I'm going to take some of that permanent rose and get quite a bit of it and put it down and try to get a really strong amount of it, like a really intense amount at a whole milk consistency as much as I can. I see Catherine has a question. If a set has the word pastel in the name, does it always have the opacity? I have the Prima set called the Vintage Pastels. Yes. So the Prima set, the Vintage Pastels, they have a lot of white mixed in. So you're going to get these effects with the opacity when you're using that color at 100% strength. And you can take and water that down. Get them out and try them out. That Vintage Pastel set, I have it too. I just couldn't find it before we went live, right? So I wanted to share it, but I have that Prima set. And I think they have a pastel, Prima has a pastel set in their confections line too. So those are traditional watercolors, very much like what you see here, with a lot of white added to them to get to that pastel. All right, here's our, I hope that helps, Catherine. Get it out and try it and let me know how it goes. Here's the Dr. P.H. Martin's white. Here is my transparent watercolor. Let's mix them together. Now, we're going to get more of more opacity using the Dr. P.H. Martin's. Oh, that's so delicious. Coming off like Easter candy and eating way too much. That's delicious. More opacity. So see the opacity here when I used the Chinese white from my set that was attached? There is a lot more transparency in that version. And then with the P.H. Martin's, because this is a bleed proof white, this is an intense amount of white and extremely opaque. I can come in though, and I'm still able to change the value of this color from opaque to more of a transparent just by adding water. So what's the difference between pastel watercolors and gouache? Gouache is basically, it's not basically, it's opaque watercolor. These pastels are opaque watercolors, but if you buy gouache from the tube, the consistency is a lot thicker. And sometimes there's a shine. It is not always a matte finish, but there's definitely, you can run your hands over gouache when it dries and you have a feeling that's very similar to acrylic, but it can be watered down and moved. Acrylics, once they're dry, can't be watered down and moved. So those are some of the differences. And I've shared some of the ways that you can create your own pastels. Bleed proof white or Chinese white that might already be in your set, or there's a white that might be in your set already. It's either titanium white or Chinese white. The titanium white tends to have a little bit more opacity and help you create that. And that is what is in this set. Like this set is chock full of titanium white to create these pastels. Okay, I feel like we've nerded out quite a bit. And we've got a good sense here. Let me wipe this up real quick. We've got a good sense of what some of these colors look like and what some of the pastels look like when we create them. Look at that Art Nouveau. As that's drying, that doesn't seem to have, you can see some of the white from the paper. And the White Nights as it's drying is a little bit more like, remember in kindergarten when we worked with paints and they were called, I think they were called tempera paints, right? They were very chalky. They had that chalky consistency. That's kind of what this feels like. It's got that chalky feeling when you touch it, but it's got that beautiful opacity that isn't, it's kind of a dull finish, kind of a matte finish. Oh boy, totally geeked out there. All right, now let's take what we've learned here. Let's move this out of the way and let's bring in, let's let that dry. Let's bring in, oh, I need another piece of paper. So I'm using Strathmore Ready Cut Watercolor. And that's what I always use. And we're going to stamp our big Honkin stamp down. And we're just going to paint with some of these pastel watercolors and see what shakes out. Okay, and then I'm going to talk about how you can use your colored pencils over top of it to create some extra dimension and texture. Okay, I've got the big Honkin Floral from the Speak Beautiful Things set. This is really kind of a universal flower, but when I was designing it, it was just the inspiration was based off of chamomile flower. But we're going to take some Slate ink, and I'm just going to gently ink this up. I'm using Slate because I want to be able to, instead of black, because the color, I'm going to make that slate fade away. We're doing kind of a no-line watercolor effect. And see, I'm not pushing really hard. I just want to get the impression of that flower down on my watercolor paper. And then we're going to come in. Let me just change my brush here. I've got a number 6 brush. And I think we're going to use we're going to use the white nights. We're going to use both. We got a bunch of stuff here. So let's see what we got and let's play with both. I think I'm going to bring in, we're going to bring in the white nights. Let's use the white nights. The colors I'm going to use, I've got a green, I have a lilac, and I also have like this creamy yellow. It's very similar to a Naples yellow, which we talked about last week in last week's tutorial. Also has that look, that feeling of a yellow ochre. Or in the Gina K line, I would say like sweet corn. It's like sweet corn. Okay. Now, we're also going to do a little bit something different with this stamp. Last week in the tutorial that I share with the daffodil, with the new release, we talked about editing out different images that are in your stamp image to just have one focal image. Well, here we're going to be editing in because I want to extend that stem and really give it that look of a long flower so I can use this embellishment later on a card. So we're going to do that. Let's start off first with, let's just give everything a little quick spray. I'm going to spray all of it because I think I might mix up my different greens that are over here. Let's start off with our greens. Now, the technique that I'm going to be using today is wet into dry. Paper's dry, brush is wet, I'm picking up my pigment and I'm painting it right in to, I need to add a little more water. Painting it right in, and I'm starting right here with the long stem and I'm extending the stem. And you can see that the paint is not super transparent, right? It's got a lot of pigment, a lot of white in it. I think I want to mix a little bit of another green. That's a very minty green. What if I add a little bit of this green in? What happens? Let's add a little bit in. And I actually feel like I could have mixed that over here on the side, which would have been fine. But that's okay. All right, I'm going to pick up some of this green, and I think we're going to do the stems, the leaves, in this green. I'm not sure. I didn't even name. I don't know what the name of that green is. Here we go. Let's take a peek. Emerald Green Nova. Okay, super fun. All right, let's come in. And what I'm going to do is I'm just kind of hugging the edges here and following the lines of the slate. Oops. And then just painting around the bottom of my leafery, my petals, and then I'm just going to paint inside here. I'm really going for that opacity, and look, some of that color is bleeding over, and that's okay. So normally, if I wanted to do, have more transparency, I would do a wet into wet. Now, I don't want this to bleed, so I cleaned off my brush. I'm just going to see if I can pick some of that up. And look at how I can pick up and pull away that color so I can get some light and dark. I can get opacity and I can get dark color. But I'm going to come back in and just add a little bit of it back in. And then I'm going to come to the middle, clean brush. I'm going to lift some up and out so I have a little bit of light there. That's fun. That's super fun. So getting some of the benefits of watercolor that I love so much, which is that transparency, the ability to lift some of that color up. You get your lights and darks. So this is kind of fun working with these pastel watercolors because you can get different levels of vibrancy happening. All right, let's pick up some more of the Nova, whatever it was called. I've literally forgotten, like the green Nova. Let's come in and do the same thing over here. Now, one of the other things that I really enjoy about these pastel watercolors, and the same would hold true for gouache, is that when they dry, you have another surface to work on. And I'm going to get to that when we start to add the colored pencils. So you can see the consistency here is pretty thick. And the color is really vibrant, but not super transparent. It is definitely opaque. I'm kind of digging it. Digging it. Now I'm going to clean off my brush. I'm wiping it off a little bit here. I'm going to lift some of that color out right there, just to kind of get some variation between my lights and my darks. All right. It's kind of therapeutic. Watercoloring is therapeutic, very, very therapeutic. I find it very enjoyable. And these pastel colors are just, bringing the joy. Okay, in these two sets, this set over here, we've got like this lilac color. And this set over here, we've got this lilac, which I kind of like too. They're very, very similar. So I'm going to go with this lilac and just give it a go. All right, I'm going to get some really a good amount of pigment. You can see how much pigment's here. And then we're going to dive into these petals. And another way to kind of edit this out, I'm not going to do that with this one, but you could edit out the center of this flower just simply by extending the color into it. I want to do something a little bit different with that flower, so I'm going to keep it. Oh, I've got a lot on here. I've got a lot of paint, so I'm just going to roll my brush a little bit on the edge just to kind of get some of that water, that sopping water off. And I'm just going to go around. You can see I haven't come back and added more paint to my brush because there's a lot of pigment here and I don't need to add any yet. So I really just got one really nice swirl into the pan and I'm still painting. I'm going every other, let's just move this whole line out. I'm painting every other right now, every other petal. Because I don't want the two petals to bleed into each other. We still have that opacity. Just now I'm starting to feel like I need to add a little bit more pigment. So the consistency that I'm working with here is probably, it's between whole milk and 2% milk. So there's not a lot of water. There's more paint than water. This edge right here is a little bit wet. So I'm going to just come over to this petal and just kind of paint that in. I'm choked up on the brush. You can see that I'm choked up really far onto the brush. And I'm kind of using the brush like a pencil. And that feels good to me. It's giving me a lot of control over where I'm placing my color. I kind of went in a little bit too far there, but that's all right. So we've got quite a bit going on here. And what I love about this pastels is when they dry. So you can start to see some of the outer edges drying, and we've got that solid look of the lilac, and then you've got a milky color happening because it's drying, and that white is starting to kind of show itself. And when it dries, it's going to be completely like opaque. All right, flip around. Let's go back over here. Now, I'm going to I'm going to leave a little bit of a white space in between. Notice that I still have quite a bit of pigment here, and I didn't have to go back. So if you're working with the pastel colors, notice that you don't need to use a lot to get that solid effect that you're trying to achieve. A little bit of pigment goes a long way with your painting. Oh, it's so pretty. So pretty. So pretty. Okay, let's go over, I think we can go here now. And I'm being very conscientious not to touch the edges too much. I'm leaving some white space in between. And we'll see why in a little bit, because we're going to add some colored pencil to kind of help bring a little more definition to the flower petals. Oh, I'm digging it. Digging this color. Now, I'm going to keep going with this consistency of about in between a 2% milk and a whole milk. So we've got a pretty solid, pretty solid consistency. There isn't a lot of transparency, and I was going for that on purpose. Sort of washy-washy. Not washy-washy like usual. Still have a lot of pigment on here. I'm going to lift just a little bit. So my brush is not super wet and splashy and washy like I usually paint. The brush has water on it. It's holding a lot of water, but we have a lot of pigment here. We have a lot of paint. So let's just go ahead around. Let's do this. You can see that that slate gray is just kind of falling away because of the opacity in my paint color here. Love it. And I'm just kind of filling this in. Just kind of filling that in. Look at the way you can see the parts that are drying and the parts that are still wet and how they've got that milky white texture to them. Oh, juicy, super juicy. All right, let's go over here. I'm just flipping around. So the pastel watercolors, just like any other watercolor, look, you can really lift your colors away. That green is like super, I need a little bit of water here. That green is super day glowy. It's got a lot of like high chroma green in it. I like how I'm just leaving my spaces here. Hey Zan, hello. We have some more folks popping in. Welcome, welcome. Don't worry. We always have the replay, friends. We always have the replay. Sue just asked a question. Can you use a heat gun to speed up the drying? Oh yeah, you can. And that's what we're going to be doing next, because I want to speed up the drying so that we can get to the colored pencil work. Yesterday, or yeah, was it yesterday or 2 days ago when I was experimenting and painting, I had a ceiling fan on, so it dried quick, right? It dried really, really quick with the ceiling fan. But here we go. I want to come back in. I think I'm going to leave that stem the way it is. I've got everything. I've got that first layer on it, and that's all we're going to do is one layer of color. But before I start to dry, I want to show you, if I wanted to bring some white of the paper back in, all I would have to do is lift it out. But I'm not going to do that with the petals. With the petals of the flower, we lifted out some of that color here and here, and I'm kind of loving the way that looks in the leafery. So let's just leave it. Now we're going to pull out my heat tool, and we're going to dry this up because I want to move on to the colored pencil work. You can see that it's drying really fast. Turn this way. Do a little on the back. Ooh, very nice. Oh, still a little bit wet. Nice. Love that. Okay. Just try to put the, there we go. Okay, so we can take a look. We've got a nice variation of value here. We've got some opacity and we have some white showing through, which is kind of nice. Now, what I really, really like about these pastel colors, or you could do this with gouache, but it's really going to depend on your values here, is feel it. And hopefully you can hear it. I'm going to pull this up to the microphone a little bit. it's got some texture to it. So it's got some grit in it because of the white that has been blended into the watercolor. And that is going to enable us to add another medium on top of it. And in this case, we're going to use watercolor pencils. No, not watercolor pencils, colored pencils. But before we do that, I'm going to do the center. I'm going to take a little bit of this apricotish, yellow ochreish color and add this in, just right in here. And I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm adding quite a bit of this color in. And then I'm going to drop in, let's drop in some of that yellow from over here. My face is in the way, sorry about that. Some of this yellow. Just kind of mixing a little bit of that color. I've got quite a bit of pigment here, so I'm just going to lift some up and out and away. Just going to add a little tiny, meanwhile I just completely covered everything up so you couldn't see it. A little bit of yellow in there. Sue just had a question. Can you get the same chalky effect if you use, oh, that's a really good question, Tim Holtz oxide pad inks? Okay. Yes, so if you have the Tim Holtz oxide inks in the refills, I would suggest using them that way. Shake them up really good. They are a pigment ink with that have like that white in it to give you this kind of effect. If you're going to use the ink pads, you're going to mash it down onto a surface and use a little bit of water. There's going to be some transparency. You kind of need to play with it a little bit, but you can get that chalky effect by using those inks. Yes, absolutely. Okay, I hope that helped. Now I'm going to come in. I have some Faber-Castell polychromo colors. So I've got a mauve, I've got a yellowish, a cadmium orange, an orange, and a green. And we're going to use the colored pencils to add a little bit more texture on top to kind of bring this flower to life. The flower is absolutely beautiful. You could just roll with it, let it live and be the way it is right now. But it's a little flat, right? It's a little flat. So we're going to add some of the texture and the 3D dimension back in by adding some colored pencil over top. So I'm literally just going to start to do some like sketching in with color around the edges and just a little bit on the insides just to bring it to life and just kind of show you how that works. Now, pencils. I'm working with pencils. You're going to see me choke up a little bit, and you're also going to see me pull out a little bit. I prefer to be somewhere in the middle. This gives me a lot of control. It also, I've got quite a bit of a point because I sharpened these. You really are going to want your colored pencils to be sharpened for this kind of work because we are dragging these colors over top of another medium, and it's going to be like super chalky. It's super chalky, and you're going to hear a little bit of that texture. So we're going to go in, and we're just going to gently add a little bit of, apply a little bit of color to the sides of the stem, and just add a little bit to the centers. And what you're going to find is that working with the colored pencil over top of these colors is going to give you, it's got a little bit of a chalkiness to it, yes, but it's going to grip on very, very well. And you can probably hear some of the texture that it's making. I'm going to make some little lines here just to kind of add a little bit of the veins work in there. But compare this leaf to this leaf after I have added some of this green on top. So it's enhancing the color underneath, and it's giving us a little bit more of a 3D look. Let's come in a little bit more so that we can get a little tighter in here. Dan, just at what color am I using? Okay, I am using deep cobalt green. So in this case, any kind of dark green that you have in your colored pencil stash will work. So this green that we used from the pastels was really like a high chroma green. It was this emerald green Nova. So kind of like not a super natural green that you would see out in nature. That's okay. We're having fun with the color. So I'm just adding a little bit. You can see I'm holding this out from the side, holding my colored pencils to the side, and just adding a little bit of line work right underneath here. I'm just following my lines, and it kind of gives that leaf a little bit of a shadow feel. It helps to bring that leaf up and out off the page in your eyes. Your eyes are looking at it, and it makes it seem like it's coming up and out and off the page. Love it. All right, I'm coming out pretty far now as I'm using the side of that colored pencil just to get a little bit more of this green in here. And I'm going to just come up with a line. Just add some veins over top of it. That was a little, I'm going to come back over this line, and now I'm choking up and I'm really using the point of, I'm digging that. Now, these two look really nice, a lot of really nice texture. But I'm going to come in here, just add a little bit more line work to my stem. All right, I'm good. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to stop there. All right, my next color is, I've got a mauve here, which is a darker purple. And I'm going to work around these petals and add some definition around the edges of these petals, again, to get that 3D pop and help this pop off the page a little bit. Now you can hear, I think you might be able to hear it. It's got that scratchiness you can hear as I'm going over it with the colored pencil. It's a little bit scratchy, but that's because we've got this really nice surface that we've created with the watercolor, the pastel watercolor. I'll flip this around. Just kind of work in a circular motion here. But you can see I'm holding my pencil out really far. I'm just adding a little bit. You don't need a lot. Now, when you hold your pencil out far like this, it may feel like it doesn't give you a lot of control, but it really does. And it enables you to use the pencil from the side and also apply color in a very light way so that you're not going this way and like scratching into your paper and putting dents into your paper. So give this a try with your colored pencils. We've talked about this before on the channel. I've got a couple other colored pencil tutorials that we've gone through. All right, I'm going to add a little bit here. I'm just going to start to go around. And really I'm concentrating some of that color on these outer edges of the petal. Again, just to give it shape and just to bring it to life a little bit. Now I'm pulling out a little bit, going from the side here. And adding a little bit of that color. Kind of digging it. And I'm not going to be blending this color out. I'm just going to leave the texture that we see in the way that we see it. Loving that. I'd love to know in the chat what your thoughts are on some tutorials, because usually I focus a lot on watercolor, but I'm always showing you like alternatives, right? Alternative ways to achieve some of the same effects with watercolor or other mediums that can give you watercolor effects. But I've heard from many of you about colored pencil and watercolor pencil, and I use those quite a bit on the channel. And like really taking maybe a deeper dive into those two mediums. So this is part of that. This is part of that content. Just trying to share, if you have these in your stash, some of the things that you can do with it. All right, I'm kind of digging the way this is looking. I am definitely digging the way this is looking. I got something that just popped on my screen. I'm going to keep just going around. So I'd love to know. So drop it in the chat, your thoughts on some of the things you'd like to see more of. We've been talking about different brands, and I've been taking deeper dives into the different brands. And I know that's something that a lot of you have asked me to kind of share. Just not like a review, but sharing some thoughts on using different brands. Now, I'm really digging the way this is looking. You can't really achieve watercolor, colored pencil over top of like acrylic paint, because a lot of acrylic paints are not matte, they're shiny. You know, they have a shinier finish or a semi-glossish finish. So your colored pencil isn't really going to adhere and kind of stick to the color. Catherine just shared, I love the exploration of mediums, so I can find those that are good for my style. Perfect. Yes. And I'm trying to share them in the context of techniques, so that you can apply the technique to whatever it is that your style is, or your style of stamping, or your style of painting, or your style of crafting in general. Sue just shared, I got a set of woodless watercolor pencils from Altenew. Ooh. Would love to see more of them, more on them, or other watercolor pencils. Perfect. I love watercolor pencils. Now I have the Tim Holtz ones that are the woodless. I don't have the Altenew ones, but I assume they were probably very similar in nature. Maybe different colors. You can see just kind of going around here. Now I'm getting a little bit more loose around some of these petals. And I want to come in, I'm going to add a little bit of more darker values right in between where the petals kind of meet to the center. Oh, thank you, Rhonda. She said that she learned so much from every tutorial I do. Good. I hope, it's just a little bit of a nerd out. Just kind of sharing different things with everyone. And I tend to focus a little bit on a lot of nerdy things, like how to hold your pencil, things like that. Okay. All right, I'm just going to add a little bit of color here. And a little bit. See how lightly I'm going over this? Just to add a little more texture on top. And we're not going to blend that out. Now there's a whole different kind of blending with colored pencil to get watercolor effects using Gamsol. We've done that on the channel. I'm not doing that here today. I'm really just adding a little bit of colored pencil on top, just so I can get some of that texture. So, Sue just shared another thing that I do that she loves is the mashups with the stamp sets. Yes, I love a good mashup. Okay, I'm looking now, compared to the way this flower started, which was very matte finish. Now we have some texture and we can see some dimension between the petals, and we can get a good feeling of the petals that are coming forward and the petals that are coming backward. So not exactly super realistic or hyper realistic, but definitely has a more realistic quality to it. Now I'm going to come in to the center here with a little bit of this yellow. This one is cadmium orange. And I'm just going to add a little bit of yellow again to get some definition around where this center of the flower meets the actual petals. So we've got some white here. And I'm just going to go around in a little bit of a circular motion here and adding more color. So the beautiful thing about, you could do this with your watercolor pencils. Remember, you don't need colored pencils and watercolor pencils unless you want them. You can use watercolor pencils as a color pencil and just don't activate it with water. Now I'm going to come in with a little bit of the darker cadmium orange and kind of do the same thing just on one side. I want to add just a little bit more color. But what I really like about this, working this colored pencil over the pastel watercolors, is that it's giving me, it's got that tooth to it. So it's enabling me to add other mediums on top of it. So it's got a little bit of that watercolor feel, right? It's opaque though, but it's not super opaque. We've got some vibrancy happening, and we've got a little bit of that, little bit of the paper coming through as well. So Zan just said, I have colored pencils, but I'm so new to watercolor that I haven't dived into watercolor pencils. That's okay. We'll just dive into it a little bit more here. I'm loving that. Look at that. Now, a minute ago, that center was very flat, right? It was very yellowish. It had it was that very yellow ochre-y Naples yellow look. And simply by adding these two colored pencils on top, we've elevated it. We've given it extra texture and dimension. I kind of don't mind some of the white that's showing between here. I think we're really, really close to saying, poof, we're done with this. So let me bring in the original that I did. And you can see this was a lot lighter in value. I really just could have gone a little further with this to give it a little more texture and dimension. I did that over here. This is got a little bit more. I think I got a little gray in here. I don't really want to add a little gray over there. I want to leave that the way it is. Lisa said, Cindy, oh, hello. She said, watching your videos has definitely expanded my creative palette. Yay. That's exciting. You're so talented. Thank you, sweet. That's so sweet. So sweet. Okay. Sue just said, I agree. I've used colored pencils for years and feel comfortable with them. But watercolors, I need help. Great. You're here. You're at the right channel, right? For doing watercolor work. Now, I think we're going to call this done. I want to share. We did a little bit of lifting here. Oh, I have another green. I don't think we're going to use that. We're going to call it done because I'm digging it. I'm liking the way it looks. It just has a lot more texture and dimension now. It's going to be a great embellishment. I'm going to mash this up with something else in my line. I've got, other sets with vessels. We're going to have this big honkin' flower go inside of something, and it's going to be a great, fun card. Okay. All right. Let's go back. We actually made it. We made this tutorial, even with all the nerdiness and the chatter, within a little over an hour. We're going to go a couple minutes over the hour. Okay, friends, I hope you really enjoyed today's tutorial. I hope you got a lot out of it because there was a lot. It was like another little mini lesson on mediums, pastel watercolors, colored pencils, using them together to color your big honkin' floral stamps. And I know you've got a bunch in your stash. So I hope this tutorial was super fun. I hope you got a lot out of it, and I hope you got a lot of alternatives for using what you have. If you've got some white and you've got some watercolors, you can mix up some pastels, and you can do this tutorial with anything in your stash. Okay, friends, everybody's saying such nice things. You're the best teacher. Lisa, but you had me at therapeutic. Yes. Everything that I do, like all of this is therapeutic. Sometimes making the cards are therapeutic, but for me, making the pieces that go on the card are more therapeutic. The watercolor, the process, really just taking a moment for yourself to craft your joy. I just love it. Okay, friends, I'm sending you into the weekend to craft your joy. I hope you have a ton of fun with this tutorial. I'll be back next week on Thursday. We're going to bring some watercolor pencils into the mix because you all have asked for it. And we're going to do another stamp set mashup of some sort. We'll see. I don't know. We'll see. So I hope you like and subscribe this video. That stuff makes a difference. Also, all of the links are down below in the description of all the supplies that we use today. Feel free. I would love it if you would join my free community at on my classroom at craftyourjoy.com. I post a lot of content there. Also, it's like the one-stop shop for everything tutorial and freebies. And it's like a lot of stuff there. And you can jump on my email list and find out when all the tutorials are happening, when my new Gina K releases are happening. All of that information is down below in the description. I hope you join me. I hope you join me. Okay, friends, I'm just going to bring on a little bit of music and going to say goodbye for today. And I'll see you next week. Bye now.